to 2022. Happy New Year. Welcome back to the channel. If it's your first time here, then just plain welcome. This is the Kickstarter Weekly. Now, in this week's video, I'll be covering the period from January 3rd through January 9th. And to start things off, we're going to talk about the 2 games that I played this period. Now, the first of those games is called Imperial Steam, and I feel like I can't talk about it too much at length because I only played it once, and we actually played most of the game improperly. There's a way that you have to pay for tracks, and we were doing it incorrectly. We were overpaying for tracks, but I plan on playing it very soon again, this time with my fiance, probably this week, which means I'll also be talking about it in the next Kickstarter Weekly, and I'll probably have more to say about it at that time in terms of my overall evaluation of the game and what I think about the various mechanisms. I can say from the outset that I love train games. I'm a huge fan of Age of Steam and Railways of the World. I'm not a huge fan of Irish Gauge because I don't like the way that that game kind of pares things back just to trading in stocks and track building. It doesn't include pick up deliver, which is something that I really like in my train games. This game does have pick up and deliver, although it's kind of very specific, and it creates certain rewards based on where the desire is for certain things and what the things are that you deliver. And in general, I think the overall problem with Imperial Steam, if there is a problem, is that the game is so fiddly and it has so many components and so many requirements that it's not an easy game to teach or to learn to play. There's just too much going on. There are also a lot of steps to take when you do want to do something. So you may often find yourself in a situation where you're like, well, I want to build a mine here, but I can't build a mine here for this and this and this reason. So there's a lot of planning that goes into the various moves. And in general, I really do like those kinds of games. So I think that as I play Imperial Steam more, I'm really going to grow to love it. And make no mistake, it's an enjoyable game to play. There's just a lot of things going on. And that's something I think people should know at the outset. But I do believe that upon my future plays, my enjoyment of it will increase even more, and I'll be able to give it a legit score, which I'm guessing will probably land somewhere in the 8s or 9s. But I do need to play it correctly to be able to kind of make that evaluation. I will say, however, that it's never going to be a game I'm going to pull out and just teach to someone as a first-time railroad game, cube rails game. It's also a game that I know is going to take a while to teach and take a while to play, probably, and that I'll need to be on top of it if I'm playing with people who are new players because there's just a lot of information to parse, and there will probably be a lot of questions from first-time players. So I do look forward to teaching it to more people when I know the game better. And I do look forward to playing it now that I have a very good handle on the game. The last thing I'll say about it, just to give you a taste of what the game is like for those who really like their train games, there are several rules in Imperial Steam. One of those rules is that you can never have more than 2 tracks coming in or out of a city, unless you have a train station built, which then allows you to build unlimited tracks out of the city. And when you are building tracks, you can build tracks where other players have built tracks. It's just that you need to pay each player who already has a track linking those 2 cities 10 money in addition to paying the resources to build the track. So if you were playing, say, a 4-player game and you wanted to build a track where all 3 players had already built a track, that's going to cost you an additional 30 money as opposed to just building a track where no one else is. So while you can do it, and you may want or need to do it at certain points in the game just to complete your large-scale plans of world takeover, it's going to be difficult probably to pay those costs. And so the game really is kind of directing you towards not building tracks where other players are whenever possible. There are also things that you'll need to do in the game, like build factories. You'll need workers when you build factories, and then those factories will produce a certain amount of cubes. You'll be able to collect all of those cubes one at a time as the game goes on, and you'll be able to use those cubes to build rails, build more tracks, or to deliver to city. And when you deliver cubes to cities, if you're delivering a stone, wood, or iron cube, you're going to be able to get money for that. In general, whenever you deliver cubes and you're getting money, you'll be getting more money the fewer types of those factories are on the board. So the more factories are made, the more plentiful they are, the more people are reaping the cube benefits from those factories, the less people will be able to score delivering goods of those types. And the fourth type of good, which is called coal, when you deliver that cube, you will either get a large key to that hub city or a small key to that hub city. You're only delivering cubes in hub cities. And then those keys will score a variable amount of points at the end of the game, depending on the influence that the associated hub city has at game end. So players are going to have influence, and over the course of the game, it can move around quite a bit. The cities will also have influence, and that can move around over the course of the game as well, which means that the value of those keys that you get from delivering coal to those hub cities could be wildly different depending on how the game goes. Now, I've only played one other game this period, but it was Role Player Adventures, and my fiance and I are currently progressing through a campaign. That's the way the game is played. It's a campaign game. And it's got a very strong Dungeons and Dragons feel to it. The original Role Player is already set in that kind of Dungeons and Dragons fantasy world. And this game takes either characters, if you want to import characters you've created in the Role Player game, or just characters that you create on their own for adventures. You're going to be taking those characters and bringing them into a 12 scenario campaign. Now, there are story choices that you're going to be making throughout that will alter what you're doing, different faction tracks, certain rewards, all kinds of things. So you theoretically can play the campaign multiple times and it will be different every time. Each scenario also uses a different scenario book, which looks like the modules from Dungeons and Dragons, which is pretty cool. And without spoiling anything, I can say that we're now halfway through the campaign. We're really enjoying it. I do have some doubts about how replayable it is, because even though, theoretically you could play it again, bring in different characters, there is an expansion called Nephra's Judgment that functions off of the character's alignment, and it gives you some side quests, choices that you make on your own that will only affect your character. That actually has a lot of information in it, and there are so many different alignments that if you replay the game using that expansion and characters with different alignments than you played the first time, that content will be very different each time. The problem is there's not that much of it. When you play through with a group of 3 or 4, each player is going to get one alignment, which will include 4 different paragraphs spread throughout a 12 scenario adventure that you can sort of make a choice during. If you're playing with 1 or 2 characters, you're going to double up on alignments, so you'll get 8 of those paragraph choices. It's very cool, and it's very specific to each character, but it's very limited because there aren't that many choices or that many paragraphs in the game. Now, as far as the main campaign is concerned, it is on rails. So it is one campaign. It's going to be the same every time you play it. You can make different choices, and depending on those choices, different options may be available to you. There are also faction tracks in the game, and where you are on those faction tracks may make certain storytelling choices available or not available to you. So if you play it through multiple times, theoretically, it will be somewhat different. However, from the play that we've done so far, it seems to be that most of those choices are going to be very cosmetic window dressing. And I think that's the problem with a game that is entirely scripted and very much on rails. So they'll give you some choices, kind of like they gave you in those Telltale video games before Telltale went under, like the Walking Dead video game series or The Wolf Among Us. They did a Borderlands game as well. They did a lot of great games. But their games were all kind of predicated around this idea that your choices matter. The problem is, because you were working with scripted content, the choices actually made very little difference. They might change a few lines of dialogue, an event here or there, but for the most part, you were playing through the same adventure every time, no matter the choices that you made. That does appear so far to be the case here as well. So I will have a better understanding of that by the time I finish the campaign, and when I go ahead and eventually do a full teach and review, I will be able to tell you exactly what the situation is. But for now, I can say that it doesn't seem like the choices are going to vary things too much. I think if you put the game aside and come back to it after a period of time, you don't remember it as well, that combined with some of the superficial choices that you can make differently may make it feel like you're having a different experience. But this also may be a game where people feel like those changes aren't that much, and they may just play through the campaign once and then decide to pass the game on or sell it and move on to other games. But as far as a one-time play goes, we're really enjoying the game. The one other thing I'll say is that mechanically, there's really only one thing you're doing mechanically. You are solving dice mitigation puzzles, and you're doing that in two different circumstances. One, when you're fighting monsters during combat. And the way that goes is that you have a certain number of dice in your dice combat limit. You can use some stats. You have these kind of cubes that are associated with your various stats, like you would have in Dungeons and Dragons, like strength and dexterity and constitution. So whatever the number is of those stats, and they start out very low, like 2, 3, 4, not like a full Dungeons and Dragons character. But you'll get cubes for every number you have in that stat. And then later on in the game, you can spend 2 cubes of a color to add that specific die color to the dice pool. So you'll kind of do that. You'll rig the dice pool a little bit, as much as you can, as much as you feel you need to for the combat. And then you'll draw some extra dice up to your combat limit. You'll roll the dice, and then you'll attempt to use your cards with the people that you're playing with to manipulate those dice into the colors and numbers that you need to kill the monster that you're fighting. Now, generally, combat can go up to 3 rounds. So if you don't make it on the first round, that's okay. Any dice that you have locked in stay there. And then you'll kind of start that process again of maybe trying to put specific dice in the dice pool, and you'll roll dice, and you can do that up to 3 times. Between every round of combat, though, you will take damage for any dice that have not been placed, as well as any little notations that are on the round markers, because usually going from one round to the next, you will take some damage just for that as well. So combat works that way. The skill checks are a little bit different. With skill checks, you basically have one go to get it right. But you generally have larger dice pools depending on the skill check, depending on how much you've raised your combat limit. So the combat dice limit can be raised quite a bit. The skill dice limit is always the same. It just is the same for a certain challenge. So you can't change that at all. But again, in the skill check, you can use your cubes to put certain dice in there, and then you'll add additional dice up to the skill dice limit, and then you'll use your dice mitigation abilities to try to manipulate those dice into being able to solve that puzzle. When you beat combat, or when you beat a skill test, you'll usually get some amount of experience cubes, and then at the end of a scenario, you can use those experience cubes to upgrade certain abilities. Sometimes it is the combat dice limit for your dice pool for combat. It could be specific skills and the limits of those skills. It could be health points for your characters, or it could be the number of bonus play tokens, which are tokens that you can use if you want to play more than 2 cards in a given turn or a given round when you're fighting or doing a skill check. So those can be expanded upon. It's a good game. The story's really good. The system is both clever and functional and works really well and feels very well balanced to me. The 2 problems, though, I think are the kind of very limited on-rails nature of the story, so that it's not really going to change that much from replay to replay, and also the fact that mechanically, you really just are doing the same one mechanic over and over. It's slightly different if you're doing a skill check or combat, but it's not that different. So most of what you're doing in the game is the same thing over and over and over. So if you like those dice mitigation puzzles, you're good to go. If you don't like them, or you're wanting more things to kind of vary up the gameplay, you're going to be in trouble. But it is a game that I like. I'm giving a recommendation to it right now. I'm halfway through it. I am really enjoying it. You'll have to come back, though, when I eventually do a full teach-in review, and I'm able to kind of give my thoughts on the replayability of the game and my thoughts on the overall just campaign and story once I've completed it. Okay, so those are the two different games that I played this period. Let's now move on to the two Kickstarters that are currently running. Now, the first of those games is called The Palaces of Carrara 2nd Edition. It's actually on Gamefound. It's not on Kickstarter. So if what I'm saying appeals to you and this is something you want to look at further or something you may want to back, you'll need to go to Gamefound to do that. I also always include links to the campaigns down below in the notes. So if you scroll down to the kind of top notes section for this video, you'll see links that take you either over to the Palaces of Carrara Kickstarter campaign on Gamefound or the campaign on Kickstarter that I'll be talking about next. But it's very easy. Just scroll down, click on the link, boom, you're there. Then you can look at the campaign, decide if you want to back it. So the Palaces of Carrara 2nd Edition had a minimum required funding goal on Gamefound of $45,000. They're currently sitting about $100,000, which is over 2 times that minimum required funding goal. They are going to complete their funding on Wednesday, January 5th. So if you're looking to pledge this, you should go over there before the 5th. Hopefully you'll be watching this video when it premieres and you'll still have another 24 hours or so to go over to Gamefound, take a look at the campaign and see if you want to back it. The Palaces of Carrara 2nd Edition plays 2 to 4 players. Games are going to play in about 60 to 90 minutes. The complexity on this game is medium heavy. It's a medium heavy Euro game. And the risk associated with this campaign I am judging to be medium low. It's from a publisher named Game Brewer. They've done a bunch of crowdfunding campaigns and they always do a really good job. I have a lot of faith in them as a publisher. So thematically, this is a game about getting marble and building palaces in Renaissance Italy. It is a city building and economic game, and the mechanisms that you're going to be seeing here are tile placement and set collection. Now, this game is designed by Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer. They do a lot of work together as designers. You may know them as Kiesling and Kramer. Kiesling's most popular 5 games on Board Game Geek, the highest rated games, are Azul, Azul Stained Glass of Sintra, Azul Summer Pavilion, Heaven and Ale, and Tikal. And Wolfgang Kramer's 5 highest rated games over at Board Game Geek include Colosseum, Downforce, El Grande, The Princes of Florence, and Tikal. The artist on this game is Franz Vohwinkel, and he is a prolific artist who has done art for a large number of games. The 5 games of his that are the most high rated on Board Game Geek include Clank in Space, a deck building adventure, Dominion Intrigue, Puerto Rico, The Quest for El Dorado, and Targi. And as I mentioned before, the publisher here is Game Brewer, and their 5 highest rated games on Board Game Geek include Chimera Station, Gentes, Gugong, Paris, and Pixie Queen. Now there's only 1 pledge level that you can back here, so if this is something that you're interested in, it's an easy choice. There's only 1 level for you to back at. It's an $85 pledge. It's called Deluxe 2nd Edition. And while that is the only pledge, they have made notations about what everything's going to cost when it eventually hits retail. So at retail, you will be paying $75 for this game, so $10 less, but that will be the retail edition, and it will not include any of the deluxe components. It's going to be very, very stripped back. And I'll talk about those deluxe components in just a minute, so that you can see what you're getting for that extra $10, which will probably be more like $25 once you add in the shipping. They've also noted that the deluxe version would be $120 MSRP at retail, which is $35 more than what you're paying for. Probably $20 more once you factor in shipping. However, those deluxe copies are not going to be available at retail. So even though they put out an MSRP, you will not be able to get the deluxe version for that price. Now, it's possible that Game Brewer will have additional deluxe copies that they may sell at conventions or through their website. If that is the case, those will be selling for probably $120. But that will only be if there's overstock. And those deluxe versions will not be going to game stores or to online retailers. So if you look at this game and you decide that the retail version looks too stripped down for your tastes and you really want the deluxe version, then I would encourage you to pledge through this campaign on Gamefound. it may be your only way to ever get this, unless you get lucky and find it somewhere like at a con. So let's talk about the upgrades that are going to be in that deluxe version. First of all, there's going to be a UV spot finish on the box. There is also going to be a storage system. However, it's not game trays. It looks more like sort of cardboard inserts, kind of tuck boxes. So it'll be a storage system that's based around, cardboard insert and tuck boxes. There are building tiles, monument tiles, and improvement tiles in the game. Also player boards and player screens. All of those things are going to be upgraded to a thicker level of cardboard in the deluxe version of the game. In the retail version, they're going to be much thinner. There's also going to be a rule book with better paper in the deluxe version, and there will be metal coins. Finally, there are decorations in the game, which is a kind of resource, as well as scoring markers. And I'm not talking about, one scoring marker per person, like something that would go on a scoring track. Scoring markers will be used throughout the game, so each player has many scoring markers. I don't know how many off the top of my head, but let's guesstimate it at like 12 to 14. So it's not just one thing, it's not insignificant. So you've got those decoration resources, you've got all the scoring markers, and there's also a bag that you'll be drawing tiles from. So all of those things are going to have some kind of screen printing. Silk screen printing for the wooden resources and the scoring markers, and some kind of printing on the bag. Now, in the retail version, there won't be any of those things, so all the resources will be bare, and the bag will basically be blank. So those are the upgrades you'll be getting in the deluxe version. Now, I don't talk too much about shipping in these videos because it's just different wherever you live. Even if you live in the United States, it can be different depending on which state you're in, if there's sales tax. And Alaska and Puerto Rico and Hawaii historically are quite a bit more expensive than the continental US. However, just for the sake of giving people kind of a reference marker, I have been using a shipping price, just the US shipping price, usually for the all-in. Now in this case, there's only one pledge level. So the continental US shipping price for that single pledge level in this campaign is $14. And then finally, Game Brewer is looking to deliver the Palaces of Carrara 2nd edition in September of 2022. The second crowdfunding campaign I wanted to feature today is going to take us back to Kickstarter, and that is for Call of Kilforth, a Fantasy Quest game. Now, they had a minimum required funding goal for this campaign of about $13,500. They're currently sitting at about $267,000, which is just about 20 times that minimum required funding goal, which, coming from somebody who witnesses a lot of Kickstarter campaigns and follows all of these, that's very, very good. When someone is doing, in the double digits beyond their minimum required funding goal, it's a huge success, in my opinion. So this is coming off very well. And there may be a reason for that because there are 2 previous versions of this game, and you can get all 3 of those games through this campaign, as well as all of the extras. So the fact that all of that stuff is available in this campaign may be the reason that the numbers are skyrocketing so high. But either way, it's a huge success. So Call of Kilforth is going to complete their funding on Friday, January 7th. The game plays 1 to 4 players, so it can be played exclusively as a solo player game if you just want to play it as a solo game and kind of go on these adventures on your own. Sessions should run about 45 to 180 minutes, that's 3 hours, so 45 minutes to 3 hours. Gameplay runs medium heavy complexity, and we're looking at, again, probably a medium-low risk on this campaign. It's a publisher who's published quite a few things. They have a fairly good reputation. I'm not too worried about them. They're just not as big as some of the biggest companies out there, so they haven't quite graduated to low, but they've done well, not too worried, medium-low in terms of risk. In terms of what the game is about, kind of how it plays, it's a cooperative game. It's going to use dice rolling. Players are doing some exploration and things like that. There's set collection. There's also variable player powers. I think of it more as a kind of a storytelling and exploration game, but there's other things happening. There's mechanics that you're interacting with. It's not just a simple, kind of story game where you're just making choices. There's stuff going on with tableaus of cards and kind of moving around and using various mechanics. The game is designed by Tristan Hall. He's also designed 1066, Tears to Many Mothers. Gloom of Kilforth, a Fantasy Quest game, and Shadows of Kilforth, a Fantasy Quest game. I'm not quite sure who the artists are here yet. They're not credited on Board Game Geek, they're not credited on the campaign page, and there's no rule book for this game right now that I can look at and try to see credits in. If you go to the Kickstarter page, they're referring you to rule books for the other two games and saying it's going to play similarly, but that doesn't help us figure out who the artists are. Now, there is one artist who's worked on two of the previous games. Her name is Anya Krizakowska, so I can assume that maybe she's working on this game. I just can't verify it yet. And she worked alone on the first game and then had another artist working with her on the second game. So again, I don't know if she's working alone on this game, if she has a co-artist or maybe several co-artists, or if it's different artists and she's not involved. Not sure yet. The game is published by Hall or Nothing Productions, which is Tristan Hall's company, which means that their highest rated games are going to be the same games that I just mentioned for Tristan Hall, which are 1066 Tears to Many Mothers, Gloom of Kilforth, and Shadows of Kilforth. Now, there are 5 different pledge levels for this campaign, so I'm going to run you through those 5 different pledge levels and what is involved in each of those, and then I'll talk to you about the various prices for the add-ons, because most of the things in the various pledge levels, you can just add on as add-ons if you have things you specifically want and you sort of want to put together your own pledge package. So the first pledge level is $30. It's called Shadows of Kilforth New Tales Expansion. And that is basically a new expansion for the previous game in the series, Shadows of Kilforth. So if, for instance, you're sitting at home, you went all in on Shadows of Kilforth, you really liked it, but at the same time you're not interested in getting the new game, you could just pledge for this expansion for Shadows. For $71, you can get Call of Kilforth base game, which is the base game for this new game. And it's just the base game, no frills, no extras, nothing more, just the base game. For $175, you can pledge at the Who You Gonna Call pledge level. That will take the base game for Call of Shadows and add on the following items: the Miniatures Expansion 1, the Pimp My Call Deluxe Component Upgrade, the Playmat, and the Ventures Expansion, which is the first expansion for this new game. Now, for $270, you can pledge at the Better Call Hall pledge level. That's going to give you everything I just mentioned, but it's going to add in a bunch of kind of extras and upgrades for the other two games. So you won't be getting the base games for the other two games, you're just going to get some upgrades. And those will include the Gloom of Kilforth Miniatures Expansion 1, the Shadows of Kilforth Miniatures Expansion 1, the Gloom of Kilforth Promo Pack 1, and the Shadows of Kilforth New Tales Expansion. And again, that expansion is the same one that you can buy by itself for the first pledge rate, which is $30. Now, if you don't have anything in the Kilforth series and you want to get everything, then you want to pledge at the $515 pledge level. It's called Call I Want for Christmas. It's going to take everything that we've mentioned previously and add in the following: the Gloom of Kilforth base game, the Shadows of Kilforth base game, the Gloom of Kilforth Encounters expansion, the Gloom of Kilforth Pimp My Gloom deluxe component set, the Shadows of Kilforth Adventures expansion, and the Shadows of Kilforth Pimp My Shadows deluxe component set. So that pledge level will basically get you everything in all 3 of the Kilforth standalone games and kind of all their extras. Now, if you're looking to get add-ons separately, individually, here are the prices if you're going to add them on kind of one thing at a time. The Gloom of Kilforth Promo Pack 1 is $9, and the Gloom of Kilforth Miniatures Expansion 1 is $28. The Gloom of Kilforth Encounters expansion and the Gloom of Kilforth Pimp My Gloom deluxe components, each of those are $30. And then the Gloom of Kilforth base game is $71. Now, all those prices are fairly consistent from game to game. So if we look at Shadows of Kilforth, there is no promo pack. So we start with the Shadows of Kilforth Miniatures Expansion 1, that's $28. The Shadows of Kilforth Adventures expansion, as well as the Shadows of Kilforth New Tales expansion, that's the new expansion, and the Shadows of Kilforth Pimp My Shadows Deluxe Component Set. All three of those, they're each $30. And then the Shadows of Kilforth base game is $71, the same as Gloom. The Call of Kilforth Miniatures Expansion 1 is also $28. The Call of Kilforth Ventures Expansion and the Pimp My Call Deluxe Component Set, both of those are $30. There's not a second expansion for the new game because it's new. There hasn't been a second expansion produced yet. However, you can get a playmat for this game. That will cost you $48 as an add-on. And then finally, if you're like buying a second copy of Call of Kilforth, that also will be $71. So if you look at all of those kind of prices next to each other, they're consistent from game to game and kind of add-on type to add-on type. Now, I cannot give you a shipping price actually for this campaign because they haven't listed one. They know that it's going to be a while until they deliver, and with everything that's going on with the global shipping crisis and the kind of way that COVID has affected shipping worldwide, they know that the prices may be very different when they eventually go to ship their games out. So they haven't listed anything. What they have done is provided a link that you can click to, and you can basically put one of their previous games in your cart and start to buy it and see what the shipping is going to be for that, and then just not continue with the transaction and use that information to kind of target what they think shipping would be, right now if they sent the game out now. And usually if there's something on Kickstarter where I can kind of start to do a pledge and figure those things, I'll do it. But because I had to go over to a third-party site and kind of create an account and do all these things, I didn't want to do that to get a shipping figure. So there is no shipping figure yet, and the reality is that whatever they listed probably wouldn't be accurate when the game eventually delivers, because All or Nothing is aiming to deliver this game in January of 2023. So it's not even going to deliver in 2022. In fact, with everything that's been happening with just shipping delays, it's entirely possible that January shipping date will itself get pushed a little bit later, maybe to March or April. So the shipping prices may be well over a year off. So just know that there is no shipping estimate at this time, but it will be more than whatever the Bear Pledge is. And usually for a game like this, depending on what you're buying, it's going to be somewhere between like $15 and $30. Maybe $10 to $15 if you're just buying the base game, and if you're buying like a bigger pledge with a lot of add-ons and things like that, you may be hitting the $30 range. If you buy all of the games with all of the extras and things, I don't know, it just depends on what's going on and weight, but that 30 could grow closer to 50. It just depends. But that concludes the 2 currently running Kickstarters that I wanted to talk to you guys about today. Now, as far as pledged games go, this is the section where I usually talk to you and reveal which of the games that I profiled the previous week I actually personally pledged. Now, I only profiled one game in last week's video, and that was Shikoku 1889, which is an 18XX train game set in Japan. And I do not own any 18XX games. And Shikoku is supposed to be a pretty good one and a pretty good jumping on point. So I did back Shikoku 1889, and I'm looking forward to playing that when it eventually is produced and delivers. I also acquired 2 games this period. Now, I had a bunch of games come into December, just a ton of games. Some of them were delayed Kickstarters that finally delivered with, some of the Kickstarters that were supposed to deliver in December. Some of them were retail games that I picked up, some on holiday sales, and some of them were games that I'd sort of pre-ordered that those games have been affected by the shipping crisis as well. So some of the pre-order games were delayed 3 to 6 months. So I just got in a ton of games in December, like maybe up to 30 games. However, I've talked about most of those in the videos from the last couple weeks. So only 2 games arrived in this last week, which makes a lot of sense because it was right in the holidays when a lot of things were happening, things weren't delivering. But the games that I got were Broom Service, which is an older Alexander Pfister game, which is largely out of print. It's very hard to find. They even did a card game version a year or two later, and oftentimes when people go and try to order the board game, which is supposed to be, from everything that I've looked at, the superior version of the game, people will end up getting the card game delivered to them and then having to go back to the seller, the shipper, and saying, no, you mislabeled that. So I did get the board game. I found it through Amazon, which I try not to use for board games, but considering I cannot find Broom Service anywhere else, and I've been looking for it for the last year or two, I went ahead and I ordered Broom Service through Amazon, and the right version showed up. I'm really excited about it. It's hard to find. I don't know if I put it in a Grail game category for me, but it was one of those games that I was looking for a while, and it's a cute pick up and deliver game that kind of feels like, if you're familiar with Miyazaki movies, it kind of feels like Kiki's Delivery Service, the board game, if they'd made a board game based on that animated film. So I know my fiance is really going to be excited about this game, and it's something that not only I wanted, because it's designed by Alexander Pfister, who's a favorite designer of mine. He did games like Maracaibo, Great Western Trail, and Mombasa. So it is a hard to find game, and also a game by a much beloved designer. So very much looking forward to playing that game when we can get it to the table. The other game that showed up is Caper Europe, which there is a card game. I think it's like a social deduction game with cards, but it was originally designed for 2 to 4 players, and it's been fairly popular. I think it's actually out of print. So last year they did a Kickstarter for a new version that is just a 2-player game, so it's kind of more of a head-to-head game between 2 players, and it looked really neat, and I backed it, and it finally arrived. So that is a game I hopefully will be doing a first impressions video on when I get back to my first impressions video. And more on that in just a minute. So the last thing I'd like to talk about before I wrap this video is a little update for the channel, and I'm doing it in my What's Coming section. So here's the number update for now. It actually increased since the last video. That is the number of 2020 games I have left to play before I can complete my best of 2020 list. It actually went up 1 because there was a game that I ordered I plan on playing with my fiance. It's called The Loop. I realized after the fact it's actually a 2020 game, so that needs to be added to the list. So that's the number of games that I need to finish playing. Once I do, I will be putting out my top 30 of 2020, and that is likely to happen in March. It will follow another series that I'm currently working on, which is my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. So I plan on doing 5 kind of bigger video series over the course of this coming year. The first one is running right now. It is my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. Now, at the time that you're watching this, the video should already be up with my 10 honorable mentions. That's going to be the first video in that series. The second and third videos will come out later this week. Those will be the videos talking about my 40 most anticipated expansions, reprints, and later editions of games. And then at the end of this week, and probably most of next week, I'll be putting out the remaining 5 videos in that 8-video series, and that will include 20 games each in my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. Now, because these aren't games that I've played, these are games that I'm just excited about, I'm not going to do any kind of ranked order for it. When I give you my 100 games, they'll be in alphabetical order, and I think that's going to be the better way for, viewers to use it as a tool, because rather than kind of having to sort through a big jumbledy bloogedy bluck of all these games, it'll be in alphabetical order, and you can kind of quickly scan through it and see if there's anything in there that jumps out for you. Then in March, I'll be doing my second series of the year, and that will be the top 30 games of 2020. Yes, you heard that right. The top 30 games of 2020. And that number that I had up there, that was referring to the games that I have left to play before I can produce that series. But I am looking to produce it in probably March of this year. As we go forward into June, so we're kind of going quarter by quarter here. as we hit June, I'll be doing my top 300 games of all time. And I'm going to have a friend come in and join me probably for the last 50 games, and then he'll be giving his top 50 along with my top 50, and we'll be able to talk back and forth a little bit about each of our picks. Now, I'm a heavier gamer. I like, Euros, and I like dungeon crawlers and kind of storytelling games. So my list will definitely lean towards that. He likes, dungeon crawlers is really his forte, but he likes a lot of interesting games you may not know, and kind of lighter games, more eclectic stuff. So I think our two lists together will be really nice and complementary. Then as I head into the fall, probably around September, I'll be doing my top 30 games of 2021 last year. So that will give me, 9 more months after I finish catching up with my games from 2020 to then catch up on the games from 2021. And then in December, I'll be doing my top 100 most anticipated games of 2023 as we prepare to go into 2023. That means that then next year in March, I'll be probably doing my top 30 games of 2022. And then from then on, as we progress over years, as time goes forward and we all get older, every December I will be doing my most anticipated games of the coming year. And then in March, once I've had time to play any stragglers, I'll be doing my top 30 games of that previous year. So those are kind of the big projects that are happening over this year. And right now, we're just starting to get into those top 100 most anticipated games of 2022. But also, over the next couple weeks, interspersed with those, you will see more Kickstarter weekly videos, and you will see me playing catch-up with my November 2021 Game of the Month video and my December 2021 Game of the Month video. And then once I get into February, I will be doing my January 2022 Game of the Month video. And in those videos, I just talk about my favorite / the best games that I played that previous month. So I will be doing a little bit of catch-up for the end of 2021 and interspersing those videos over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Lastly and finally, I've been producing some first impressions videos. I have had kind of a backlog going, and I plan on just wiping that backlog free. So once I get through all of these videos that I'm doing over the next couple weeks, the anticipated games of 2022, the Game of the Month videos that I'm catching up on, and keeping current with the Kickstarter weeklies, I will then be getting back to doing first impressions videos. But I will just move forward and produce those videos for Kickstarters that have just delivered or retail games that are brand new that I've just purchased. And I think rather than trying to play catch up with some of the games from last year that I wanted to put those videos out for, as I have time, if I really want to make videos on those games, I just will do full teach and reviews. So I want to keep the first impressions videos limited to just very new games, and I'm also trying to keep the time on those down as we move forward. The purpose of those videos isn't to give you a full explanation of the game, but just to show you enough of a game and its mechanics when it's brand new that you'll have an idea whether or not that's something you may want to purchase. And one last thing. I know from looking forward that there aren't any Kickstarters that I want to profile for the next several weeks. Crowdfunding was kind of dead during December to some degree. People were just not launching campaigns. Big companies were not launching campaigns during the holidays. I think it requires too much work from their employees during the holidays. And, sometimes people are spending all their money on presents for families and things. So they don't have money necessarily that they want to spend during the month of December, which means I already know all the games that are going to be completing their funding for the next several weeks, and none of those do I wish to profile. So it may be a few more weeks until new campaigns get launched now that we're getting into the new year, and then those games run their campaigns and are getting to the point that they're completing funding, that I'm ready to do more Kickstarter weeklies focusing on those games. So in the next couple weeks, you may see me not produce a Kickstarter weekly for a couple weeks, for 2 or 3 weeks, or if I do produce it, I'll actually not be talking about Kickstarter, but only about the games that I played, the games that I pledged, if there were any new ones, and the games that arrived that I acquired. And I'll have to make a judgment call on that. I think what I will probably try to do is wait until the next Kickstarter Weekly where I actually am covering games that are completing funding. And I'll probably just try to push all of those games, like all the games that I've played and all the games that I've acquired into that next video, even if that's several weeks off. However, if I get to the point where there is such a backlog of stuff to talk about, then I probably will do at least one Kickstarter Weekly, just so that I can talk about that stuff. And then when I finally do produce a Kickstarter Weekly with new campaigns that are funding, it's not ridiculously long. It's not like a 2 or 3 hour video because I have all of these other backlog games that I played or games that I acquired to talk about. So I'll play that by ear. Just know if you don't see a Kickstarter Weekly for the next couple weeks, that's okay. I'm going to be producing a lot of other video content for you to watch. And the main reason that those videos aren't coming out is because there aren't Kickstarter campaigns that I want to be recommending. So that's that. Anyway, I hope you're still having a holiday season if you can. I hope you're kind of extending it out a little bit and playing lots of fun games. Thank you very much for watching this entire video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, especially if you like this video and you want to stay up to date with my new content as it comes out. Especially remember, I have this new anticipated game series going on, and then in March I'll have my top 30 of 2020. Also, some point later in the year, probably between June and September, I'll also be launching a Patreon, but that's still a ways out yet. So have a great week, everyone. Play all the games that you can. Let me know if either of these games that I talked about are games that appeal to you that you may consider backing on Kickstarter or on Gamefound. And I will see you all very soon. Take care. Bye.